Hello, this is Frater Ralph coming at you live from Cowtown, Wheatland, Missouri on Hermetic Temple Radio. And it is just about time for our 11:11 meditation practice. Plus, after the meditation period, which will last about 40 minutes today, after that, we will be doing a short talk on what it means to be a Contra-Establishment spiritual entity, or, well, spiritual organization. We're counting Temple of the Infinite Universe here as being a spiritual entity. We are registered as a nonprofit in the state of Missouri, and we are working towards our IRS nonprofit recognition as well. I think I said that word right. Recognition. So we are getting ready for our 11:11 practice. We have been off the air for about a week due to heavy rainstorms. We have our monsoon season that has come in. Normally this time of year we have a drought, but the last 3-4 years or so, drought has been replaced with monsoons. I believe that is because of the climate change or climate shift or, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, things are definitely changing down here in our neck of the woods, and we are slowly turning into a subtropical region. And meanwhile, over in California, I know you folks are getting baked, but that's enough about that, I guess. But anyway, we are back online. The weather is favorable to us. We were getting some local flash floods, but no damage done, here, outside of just a very bad internet connection, which it's a satellite-based internet connection, and anytime we have serious storms moving through, internet connection is just, very iffy and very unreliable. So I'm glad to see a change in the weather now where we are able to get back out on the airwaves again and do our thing. But for now, we will begin our 11:11 meditation practice. I would like you to please sit comfortably if you're going to join us in meditation today. And I would also like to give fair warning that, if you are driving a car or operating any sort of heavy equipment, heavy machinery, please do not listen to this broadcast. Turn it off, catch the download, and turn it back on when you can go into an altered state of consciousness in a safe environment. Don't want to be driving a car and nodding off into a either altered state of consciousness or a deep sleep. Don't want that to happen. It's too dangerous. So if you are in a safe, comfortable spot, please find a position where you can be comfortable for the next 40 minutes. And I recommend closing your eyes and just relax. Take in a deep breath through your nose. Hold the breath for a few moments. And exhale, preferably through your nose. Again, breathe in. And exhale. Breathe in, breathing in the energy of the cosmos. And exhale, exhaling all the negativity. Again, breathe in. And exhale. Now continue breathing normally, and we will begin our intonation of the vowel sound oo. Ooh. Ooh. Continue to breathe in, breathe out normally. Remain in a calm, relaxed state. Smile. Open your eyes and return to normal, awakening consciousness. Well, thank you everybody for joining with us at the 11:11 meditation practice. That was our long form. Rather than doing this on a daily basis, we are going to begin to observe regular practice days where we come together and do this meditation as an online community. Followers may continue to practice their own 11:11 meditation on a daily basis or twice daily basis, or however long and whenever you wish to do the meditation. But as a group, we will be doing it together on Sundays. That will be our next meditation broadcast will be this upcoming Sunday, and we will observe the long form of meditation again. And then during the week, we will do a second short form meditation practice on Thursdays. And of course, those broadcasts will be done depending upon the weather permitting. If we have a strong internet connection, we will do it. And if we don't, we will forego it until the next scheduled practice. And in between times, what I'll begin doing, rather than the full 11:11 meditation practice for other days during the week, I will pick a meditation topic for discussion, and on other days we will discuss that. Now, our meditation topic for today, and actually it's not really a meditation topic, but more of a philosophical topic here at Temple of the Infinite Universe, but question has been raised, are you anti-establishment? I think I've spoken to that a little bit before, saying that, we are not a part of the standard religious establishment. We tend to go along the mindset more of Bernie Sanders and being more of an anti-establishment type of an organization. And I got thinking about that, and actually that doesn't do our position on establishment religion or establishment politics or establishment economics, full justice. We're not really what I would call absolute anti-establishment. And I've been trying to coin a term that resonates with me and my wife, Reverend Heidi. Now, she came up with the term, going back to her original Spanish language. And she said, well, how about Contra-Establishment? And I got thinking about that, and I think that does do it more justice. You can be anti-something, anti-this, anti-that, all you want to, but that tells us, it tells us what you're against, but it doesn't really tell us what you are for. And constantly using the term anti, to discuss politics or religion or theology, it really doesn't do it full justice. You need to have a more positive way of expressing it, at least according to my thinking. And so, we've come up with the term contra-establishment. And I think of it this way. You think of your wife, your husband, your children, your other friends, neighbors, business associates. Sometimes you get along great. And then other times, though, you don't get along so well. You find that if you're married and you're talking to your spouse on a certain topic, you may be expressing your point of view, and then all of a sudden your spouse comes up with a contradictory point of view, sort of a contra argument. She contradicts you, he contradicts you, or you're having a discussion with your children and you're telling them, okay, this is the way I think things should be. And all of a sudden they come up with a contradictory point of view and say, oh, no, I think we should do things this way. And you still love your spouse, you still love your children, you still love your friends and your neighbors, even when they come up with these contradictory points of view. But at the same time, it's not necessarily that pleasant, but you don't want to haul off and hit anybody either. And that's why I prefer the term contra-establishment to anti-establishment. My understanding of contra-establishment is that the basis of this attitude is one of love, one of care, one of concern. Sometimes it's tough love, where, okay, we may need to separate for a while. I may need to back out of this situation, or I may have to maybe resign from a certain office in order to accomplish what I think needs to be accomplished. But I still love the person, or the organization, or the institution that I am trying to work with. The whole attitude of being anti-establishment, that whole basis of founding everything on love, it can still be there in an anti-establishment mindset, but it doesn't have to be there. Person is totally at liberty to not love, to absolutely hate the establishment, to want to destroy the establishment, to want to do serious bodily, physical, institutional harm either to a person or to an organization. That whole anti-this point of view, or anti-establishment point of view, it's like the difference between protesters marching peaceably in the street, calling for common sense reform of the government or of the police department. And that is what I would call a contra-establishment mindset. And oppose that to a person who decides to become a vigilante, pick up an automatic weapon, and just go out there and start shooting police officers or bombing office buildings or government buildings. That is what I would call an anti-establishment attitude on steroids. Now, being anti-establishment, in my way of thinking about things, it doesn't necessarily mean you are going to resort to violence, but it is built on a mindset more of focusing on what I am against. And when you focus only on what you are against, you are focusing on the negative. And when you focus on the negative, negative things will be given power. Negative feelings will be allowed to develop. Animosity will be allowed and permitted to grow. And then once you start feeding the negative in your heart and in your life, there is no telling where it is going to end. It may just come to a head with yelling and screaming and shouting matches, or it may cross the line into actual physical violence. And, I think a lot of times, especially when we are talking about personal relationships between two people, like a husband and a wife, we distinguish between violent words and violent actions, but actually words can be every bit as damaging, sometimes even more so damaging than violent actions. Words hurt too. So when we focus on the negative tends to grow, and that's the danger I see with using the term anti-establishment, is that you're starting off with a negative foundation, and then you're seeking to build on that negative foundation. And of course, what we hear from the teaching of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount is that, it is a wise builder who builds his home on rock. It is a very foolish builder who builds his home on sand. And when we start out with a negative foundation, just focusing only on what we're against, we are laying out a foundation of sand and then attempting to build a movement or an organization or a political party on that sand. And that weak foundation will serve for a short time, but it is no good for any kind of long-term goals or long-term progress. Now, the beauty I see with the Contra-Establishment point of view is that it is focused on something constructive. Like the examples I gave before, you can love somebody and contradict them. And you may be contradicting them simply because you're right, or you think you're right, and they're wrong, or you think they're wrong. And you can do it out of love. If you've been married for any number of years, you know that your spouse can be highly contradictory, can be contrary as can be, but you still love them, and they still love you, and you still get along fine. And that's the Contra-Establishment type of attitude, is that we don't want to destroy the establishment. We acknowledge, like Bernie Sanders has, and like the supporters of Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump both have seen, is that we have a political establishment that is, for lack of a better way of putting it, corrupt as hell. And I think anybody can see it. We've had a corrupt political order, corrupt social order, corrupt economic order, and to the extent that mainline churches and denominations have gone along with this corruption, we also have a corrupt spiritual order. And that's where we come in here at Temple of the Infinite Universe. We want to try to clean out that corruption, separate ourselves from the corrupt institutions, and just say, hey, we're here to point out the corruption that we see. We want to help you correct this corruption, clean out that corruption from your church life, from your temple life, from your personal spiritual life. And we would like to just help you become aware of the corruption that exists within these various church and religious organizations. And Our attitude on that is that a lot of times, many times, people will be living within a corrupt system, a corrupt society, and just be so used to seeing this corruption that they no longer think of it as being corrupt. They think of it as the status quo, the new normal. That's just the way it is, and it's never going to change. People become so desensitized to corruption that even when it looks them straight in the eye, they tend to deny it. They just think, well, that's the way it's always been, and we just have to go along with it. So, to me, a big part of being contra-establishment is trying to raise people's awareness to the fact that we are living in a sea of corruption, and that's part of what I've been trying to accomplish with my radio series, The Lost Teachings of Jesus, is that many people who were raised Christian, who have been Christian all their lives, they've been taught that their official church doctrine and dogma that has been around for centuries, if not a couple thousand of years, they tend to think that that church teaching is exactly the same as the teaching of Jesus back in the 1st century of the Common Era. And what we've been trying to do with that program, The Lost Teachings of Jesus, is to show that there is a difference, a profound difference between what Jesus taught some 2,000 years ago and what most churches practice in the name of Jesus in the 20th and now the 21st century. Christian churches have had a very, very long history of just missing the point when it comes to the teachings of Jesus, and just totally ignoring the teachings of Jesus, and rather focusing on other teachers like Paul or Augustine or Martin Luther or John Calvin or your favorite pope or your local priest or minister or rabbi or other spiritual teacher. We tend to accept what we've been taught from childhood as being the gospel truth when it comes to spiritual principles. But a lot of us have been raised to never question those teachings. And that's what we say. Test everything and keep what is good. Keep what makes sense to you. And gradually, slowly, weed out the falsehoods that you see. And weed them out carefully. Because you don't want to be violently uprooting all the falsehood that you see, and then in your zeal run the risk of also tearing up and destroying some of the good that is growing up within that field of falsehood. So, being contra-establishment, it's something that it's an attitude based on love, where we take a good, hard, honest look at the world around us. And we know pretty much what we're against. But we go deeper than just what we are against. We also take a look at the world and we ask ourselves the question, what would I like to see? And I don't care if it is something that has never even existed before in the known history of humanity. I want to take a good hard look at the world and ask myself the question, what is it that I want to see? What is it that I want to build? What kind of a world do I want to create with my thoughts, with my attitudes, with my emotions, and with my actions? What do I wish to build? And then focus on that positive energy. And then further ask yourself the question, what do I have to do in order to help facilitate this change, to get us away from the current corrupt social order in, whatever level of the social order it is that you are involved with. Some will be involved in the political order, like Bernie Sanders was, like Donald Trump supporters are. Well, I guess Bernie Sanders supporters still are involved in trying to make significant change. I know I am. And other politicians that are trying to bring about change, progressive change or positive change, however you wish to say that. We have to ask ourselves the question, what do we have to do to facilitate this change? And I think the answer is going to be more than just marching in the street and screaming like hell. And it's definitely going to be a lot more than just picking up weapons and killing people at random. That is not a positive way to bring about change. That is just a way of lashing out, of expressing your anger in a destructive manner. We're all about constructive means. We do not stand for destructive means. And we have to just ask ourselves, how do we constructively engage with the world around us to first of all awaken people, because there are a lot of people out there that are still sleeping, that think in terms that they have been, and I don't think this is putting it too strongly, thinking in the terms that they have been brainwashed with from day one. We have a lot of zombies out there that have been carefully trained and conditioned to think in only one certain way. And that's the way that the establishment likes it, whether we're talking about political or religious or economic or any other level of establishment. We have all been carefully trained to think in a certain way. And those who think in that certain way are generally rewarded, at least they're not punished. And those that go against that conditioning, that speak up and say, no, this isn't right, they are generally punished. Perhaps mildly ridiculed, perhaps taken out and assassinated, as in the case of Martin Luther King Jr., Bobby Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, and a number of social activists from present day on back to the beginnings of our nation. Being a Contra-Establishment kind of person, it's not always, fun games and wine and roses. We engage constructively, trying to bring about change with love, but sometimes we are met with violent resistance. But even when we are met with violent resistance, we do not return evil for evil. We do not return hatred for hatred. We do not return blood for blood. We face all of that negativity, and we face it down with love, even if that means standing squarely on your feet and allowing yourself to be ridiculed, harmed, damaged, even killed. The art of being contra-establishment, as I see it, is an act of constructive, non-violent resistance. And it demands that we be grounded on love. It also demands that we be clever and creative as we possibly can be. There's an old Hermetic saying that is attributed to Jesus, that I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be clever as serpents, and yet innocent as doves. And it's a hard order to obey, because again, in this current age of corruption, we've been taught just the exact opposite. We have not been taught to love our enemies. Jesus taught that. Most churches don't. They teach that you should hate your enemies, go out there and kill the enemies of the state, be good little soldiers. And in that sense, you can be good Christians. And when a soldier is following orders that's been given to them by enlightened generals and enlightened commander-in-chiefs, a soldier can usually obey those orders and do their duty without fear of being asked to do immoral things. But in this present age of mass slaughter in warfare, of total war, where we no longer really even discriminate between killing combatants and killing non-combatants. We've sanitized that. When we kill combatants in war, well, that's the way it should be. Soldiers killing soldiers. And, okay, that's terrible. It's the taking of life, but you can justify that. You're doing it out of defense or self-defense or the defense of your nation. But when a drone is launched, bombs are dropped, and innocent civilians are killed, according to the just war theory, which actually goes back to, in the Christian tradition, back to Augustine, and does not necessarily go back to Jesus, mass slaughter, the killing of innocent non-combatants, is something that is forbidden according to that just war theory. If a war is going to be waged justly, then just means have to be used, and you can't slaughter non-combatants in warfare. In our modern way thinking of war, we have desensitized ourselves to that common sense teaching. We hear stories about bombs going astray or targets being targeted accidentally, and scores of non-combatants, including women and children, being killed by these bombs. And we call it collateral damage. And when you hear the word collateral damage, well, first of all, most people don't even really know what that means. But when you see a village that has been totally destroyed, and the bodies of women and children lying in the street, being mourned, that is collateral damage. That is the cost of making war with an anti point of view. When you focus only on killing your enemy and killing them in mass numbers, virtually anything becomes acceptable to the establishment, to the powers that be, and even to the protesters in the street. We have to accomplish our end by any means necessary. That is classic anti-establishment or anti-thought in whatever form it may take. But when we're focusing on the positive, when we're thinking in terms not of destruction, but in terms of purifying, in terms of cleaning up, giving the baby a bath without throwing the baby out with the dirty bathwater. When we focus on that positive, then we see the wisdom in doing things a certain way, doing things in as much of an attitude of love as we can possibly do it. And where acts of violence must be used, like in the case of soldiers on the battlefield, we focus on taking out the real targets that need to be taken out and not focusing on the non-combatants. We seek to root out the evil and the corrupt, but not destroy the good in that process of uprooting. So that is why we call ourselves a Contra-Establishment spiritual entity. We do not wish to destroy the establishment. We want to constructively engage with the establishment on all levels with an attitude of love, from an attitude of engaging constructively with these other entities out there, be they political or religious or what have you, and trying to build up a more perfect world, a better world, by watching what we do, what we say, how we relate, and in the practice of meditation, how we feel, which emotions we choose to cultivate, and which emotions we choose not to cultivate. And in the end, focusing on the good rather than the evil, we have a strong foundation for good mental health, good spiritual development, and the development of a more positive social order, political order, and religious spiritual order. So focus on the good. Don't be anti. Don't just focus on the bad. Don't tell people what you're against. Also tell people what you are for, and stand for what that is that you are for. I think that's a good place to leave it today. So this is Fred Ralph signing off from Temple of the Infinite Universe. If you like what you hear in these broadcasts, think about becoming a supporter. You can find us online at www.hermetictemple.com, and you can make a donation on that website. You can check us out there and see what it is that we're up to. And until later, this is Frater Ralph signing off. I'm going to leave you with a song called Will I Remember by Anton Cosmo. And until we meet again around the universe, I wish you all a blessed day of spiritual growth and discovery. Thank you.
Drift away, remember suffer